Now, the future. You know, we deal with all these crusty old scientists. Dr. Goodwin, where are you? You're around.
Right here.
Okay. But there's actually a new generation of scientific leadership around. They're sitting in the audience looking appallingly young, but that has more to do with me than with them. This is another class of the Sea Grant Fellows, a collective description. Dr. Goodwin.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Eisenberg. And first of all, just on behalf of the Delta Science Program, we'd also like to express our appreciation to Supervisor Natoli. We've really appreciated your thoughts and guidance, certainly while I've been in this position and before that. And what you're actually going to see today, I hope, do you remember that wonderful exchange maybe 18 months ago where you couldn't understand the titles of the Science Fellows at all?
Yes.
And so out of that, we developed this early career leadership workshop and the opportunity for them to present their work. So that was certainly your influence. So it's very appropriate that you're here to hear the class. First of all, I would like to just... Shauna O is in the back of the room. Shauna, would you like to just stand up? Shauna's with the Sea Grant program at UC San Diego. And in the science program and the council, we really value this partnership with Sea Grant. They organize the review panels, which is very, very rigorous, for the appointment of these fellows. They deal with the university contracts. They ensure the mentoring plans are put together. So this isn't just us handing out money, but we want to really make a connection between your investment and the future careers of these young scientists. And more recently, Sean has been working on long-term tracking of until this class, it was about 79 in total, to see the effectiveness of the program. Where do these people end up in their career? Do they stay engaged with Delta issues, or at least in environmental issues at the national level? And from a selfish point of view in the science program, we know we have a lot of review responsibilities coming up in the future, and we see this as a great way of bringing back experience in the future. Some of our alumni, like Steve Culberson, you've heard many times, he was a member of the science program staff. He's now working with one of the federal agencies, so it keeps people engaged. As a brief summary, these fellows are selected on the basis of 3 parameters. One is the research merit. Secondly, contribution to key Delta issues. And thirdly, the strength of the collaboration between the agency or organization and the university that they're working with. So we really appreciate this, and also Shauna ran a very nice webcast, because the feedback we got last year was that there were some great ideas out there, but the proposals really were not hitting on these areas. So it could be great research, but if there wasn't a connection to a Delta problem, it didn't rank very highly. So as I mentioned in the previous council members meeting, this class were really spectacular. And most of I think all but 5 of the proposals received should have been awarded. It was a 30% success rate. And before I get to introducing them, we'd also like to appreciate our partners this year, because the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and the California Department of Water Resources have all contributed to the program this year. So we've been able to make double the number of awards that we could have done otherwise with our available funding. So we think this is a wonderful model, and hopefully portends the future. So you're going to here have a brief elevator speech, but the fellows this week have been participating in the Early Career Leadership Workshop that Shauna and Marina Brand have hosted. There's been many speakers, including Chair Eisenberg, who set the tone on the first morning. In addition to that, we've had council alumna, like Felicia Marcus, has also participated. If you're interested, you can go online to see what other experiences the early career leadership included. But what I'm going to do now is just introduce each of the fellows to you briefly. I'll just give their institution and their community mentor, this is their agency partner, and allow them to describe their research, because they'll do it a lot more eloquently than I will. So the first is Erin Bray, who's with UC Santa Cruz, and her community mentor is the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. So, Erin.
Hi,
Ms.
my name's Erin Bray. I'm a postdoctoral scholar, and my research focuses mainly on hydrology and geomorphology within river systems in the delta. I'm working on quantifying the effects of gravel bar features and their sediment characteristics on the exchange of groundwater to and from the river channel. Gravel bars form along the river channel and extend into the floodplains, and they promote the exchange or flow of water through the streambed interface. This hydrologic feature is important for Chinook salmon, particularly during spawning times, and also when the eggs are buried within the gravel. So in order to improve our predictive understanding of the physical processes that control flow through the streambed and through gravel bars, I'll be using a combination of field methods as well as two-dimensional modeling to look at how the influences of stream flow releases below dams change the conditions and how they affect sediment patterns that promote this exchange that's important for the salmon early life stages. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Bray.
Our second fellow is Dr. Anna Stark, who's working with UC Berkeley and the Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Doctor?
Hi, I'm originally from London, just to let you know. So, is big always better? This is one of the many questions faced by juvenile Chinook salmon as they decide when to embark on their journey to the ocean. So in this study, I will look at the trapping data to see what size and what time juveniles are leaving their natal rivers. I will then look at size at outmigration reconstructions in spawning, i.e. successful adults, to see who really survives and under what river conditions. We already know that juvenile Chinook salmon leave at different sizes, ages and times of year. And we believe that this variability contributes to their resilience, allowing them to deal with unexpected situations like earthquakes or big storm events. So we compare this variability to kind of financial bet hedging or the portfolio effect. However, the current situation in the Central Valley is that we tend to prioritise abundance over resilience. And current water operations and hatchery management tend to be focusing on the largest juveniles only, constraining size and time that they leave fresh water. So what I want to look at is the implications of this and to better understand the importance of the portfolio effect. And I want to look into ways that we can promote both resilience and abundance with the current resources available to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. The third fellow is Dr. Ken Jeffress, who's at UC Davis, and he's working with the Department of Water Resources.
Good morning. Thank you for...
Pull that mic up, so, yeah, just angle it up. That's great.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to be here. My research is going to focus on how climate change, mainly increases in water temperature, will affect three species of fish in the Bay Delta system: the delta smelt, the longfin smelt, and the inland silverside. So, of course, the delta smelt and the longfin smelt, those populations have been decreasing in recent years, whereas the inland silverside abundance has actually been on the rise. So with climate change, we're expecting an increase in ambient and extreme water temperatures in the Bay Delta system. However, we don't know how these fish will respond to these increases in temperature. So my research will characterize the temperature response in these species, and then I will use state-of-the-art molecular genetics approaches to develop tools for monitoring and managing these species during high periods of high water temperatures. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fourth is Dr. Elizabeth Wells, who's at UC Davis, and her community mentor is the U.S. Geological Survey.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for your time. I'm going to be working on also another climate change project, but what I'm looking at is how it's going to change the impacts of two invasive species. In the low salinity area of the Delta, there are two invasive clams that are both very extremely efficient consumers of the phytoplankton in the water column. This is the base of the food web that feeds up to the fish that we care about, like delta smelt and salmon and striped bass. We don't know how climate change, the changes in temperature and in salinity, are going to affect the activity and feeding of these clams. So I'm going to run a bunch of laboratory experiments and field experiments to look at how these clams will respond to future climate change. This will help managers in the future know what kind of food web we have to support these fish going on into the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next fellow is Dr. Qinfang Wu, who's at UC Berkeley, and her community mentor is also the U.S. Geological Survey.
Hi, I'm Yvonne Wall. I'm a postdoc fellow of the data science program. So my research is to use a fleet of drifters to understand how the shallow water habitats working. And our group built a fleet of floating robots that can be sent in fresh water around the wetland and take measurements wherever we send them to go. And these floating robots, officially called the floating sensor networks, each of them equipped with sensors that can take water velocities, salinities, chlorine fines, and turbidity, any measurements we want them to take. So these robots can report the measurements every 5 seconds to our central database and in real time. So with that in mind, we can make a very detailed observations ever than before. And this numerous amount of data can be further analyzed to develop a quantitative model and give us a big picture about the wetland. So future plans calls about the wetlands restoration and understanding and be very specified the attributes of wetland is very important to make these things happen beneficially implemented, especially in the context that the water discharge and the sea levels will rise.
Did you think up the term smart drifters, or did you just inherit that term?
We invent that term, smart drifters.
Congratulations.
All right, thank you.
Sounds rather like scientists.
Yeah.
I should also have added that the USGS has made contributions to equipment for some of these projects, so we appreciate their support as well. Our next science fellow is Dr. Priyanka Sharma, who's working with Caltech JPL, and the community sponsor is the Department of Water Resources.
Good morning, everybody, and
Morning.
thank you for taking out the time to listen to all of us today. So over 1,000 kilometers of levees in the Delta region maintain the channel system that transports a significant portion of the freshwater supply for California. And the focus of my study will be to use advanced radar remote sensing techniques to monitor the stability of these levees and to measure subsidence trends in the Delta that are needed to develop long-term water management strategies for the region. I will use radar data from NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratories aircraft sensor called the UAV SAR to remotely detect surface changes on and near levees in the form of seepage and deformation. I will be using NASA's radar instrument to observe same regions in the Delta multiple times in order to help me to look for signs of these deformation. The results of my research will supplement more traditional ground-based levee monitoring techniques, and I will provide more spatially complete, more frequently acquired, and more consistent methods for both short and long-term monitoring of the levees. I will deliver these results in the form of maps that show exact locations of where these instabilities in the levees occur, and also how they relate with factors like soil type, land use in the region, geology of the region, and soil moisture. And I will also work directly with state agencies, especially the California Department of Water Resources, to integrate the results of this research into state programs and make it available to Delta policymakers, scientists, and resource managers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And our final postdoctoral fellow is Cedric Fisher, who's with JPL Caltech, and again, his community partner is the U.S. Geological Survey. Cedric.
Good morning, and thank you for the support. So my research will consist in developing a new approach for the rapid surface mapping of a toxic form of mercury in the delta waters using optical measurements made from an airplane. So the reason for doing that is that mercury is an important water quality issue in the delta. You have a lot of mercury coming from the nearby mountains, from abandoned mercury and gold mines that makes its way to the delta. And the wetlands in the delta are very efficient at converting this mercury into methyl mercury, which is a much more potent, much higher toxin than mercury. So now with the projects of doing wetland restorations, rice field inundations to provide new spawning habitat for salmon, sea level rise and changes in precipitation pattern, these are all environmental changes that can potentially increase the levels of methyl mercury, so that toxic form of mercury, in the delta waters. So the methods that will be developing will allow the rapid surface monitoring of the methyl mercury concentrations in the water, and will allow to assess the effects of these environmental changes on the water quality there. So that should help with achieving the core goals of it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cedric. We now move to the doctoral students, and I think these fellows need to be particularly acknowledged because they're competing with much more mature people in the research area. So the
as opposed to the older people that we've heard from already. These are
it's the next generation, Bill. So our first doctoral student is Rachel Wigginton, who is with UC Davis, and her community mentor is USDA.
Hello, I'm Rachel, and my fellowship research will focus on the impacts of an invasive plant called perennial pepperweed on the tidal marsh ecosystems within the Bay Delta region. And I'm specifically interested on the impacts of pepperweed on the ecosystem functions within these tidal marshes. So ecosystem functions are things like the biodiversity of native flora and fauna, food web support for animals like fish and birds, and even the ways that different chemicals and nutrients cycle through these ecosystems. And understanding how changes to a habitat, such as invasion by a non-native plant, alter these ecosystem functions is one of the main ways that we as ecologists can understand how these altered ecosystems might be acting differently than more natural versions of these same ecosystems. So my hope is that my research will allow us to understand exactly how Lepidium is interacting in these ecosystems, and it will give information to land managers about control and maybe even potential eradication of this plant. For those of you who don't know, the San Francisco estuary holds the distinction of being the most invaded estuary in the world. And so by giving our land managers this cutting-edge information about how to deal with invasive species, we take a really important step forward in understanding how to preserve the delta as part of the natural heritage of California.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Yeah, our next doctoral fellow is Katherine Smith, who's also with UC Davis, and her community mentor is the Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Hi, I'm Katie, and I'm lucky enough to work with one of the coolest animals in the whole world, I think. The salt marsh harvest mouse is really a local treasure. It's only found in the San Francisco Bay Estuary, and it's the only mammal in the entire world that is confined strictly to coastal marshes. And although it's been listed as endangered for a while, we don't really know a lot about it. But we do know that it suffers mainly from habitat loss. But that's not the whole story. We do see a lot of habitat that's been preserved through the use of diked managed wetlands for waterfowl habitat, as well as we're going to have new habitat coming back in the form of restored tidal wetlands. We don't really know a lot about the value of these habitat types for this species. So my project will look at that. So I'll look at mainly the effects or the interactions between salt marsh harvest mice and wetland management practices and waterfowl. So I will go into managed wetlands and look at how do mouse populations compare in non-managed and managed wetlands, what are mice eating compared to what are ducks eating, what areas of duck ponds are mice using, and in that way we can hopefully improve our multi-species management for this endangered species and then also a socially and economically important waterfowl stuff. And my second part of my project will look at restoration. Obviously, we're all aware that restoration is a huge issue within the Delta, and we don't really know how this species will react to restoration activities, both on a short scale, so if we go in there and do this stuff, what's going to happen to the mice that are there, and also what will happen in the long term as these new wetlands mature, how will that affect the populations? And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. And our final science fellow of 2013 is Ali Shafi, who's out of the, of course, the really world-famous Center on Earthquake Engineering at UCLA, and you've heard from some of their professors. And His community mentor is Kurt Schmatty, who, of course, you've also heard from very
A
recently.
well-connected consultant.
So there may be some applications here. So,
hi, and thank you for the opportunity that you provided me. My research focuses on the soil behavior or the deformational behavior of the peat in the delta. We know that the levees are the critical components of the water supply in the delta. All the levees have been built on an organic soil which is called peat. Our preliminary experimental tests have shown that the peat are susceptible to very large settlements if the earthquake is quite strong. So, and this large settlement may cause levees to fail. And this is new mechanisms of the failure that we are thinking that should be considered in the future the delta risk management strategy. So, and more interestingly, we are thinking that the strong earthquake will reset the clock. For example, if the peat layer in the delta has been experienced something like, for example, 5 feet of settlement over 1,000 years, we are thinking that a strong earthquake would reset the clock, and we will see the same settlement, over a few days. And this is a new mechanisms of the levees failure that should be considered. And we are working on the deformational behavior of the peat, and we are doing many tests on the peat to develop a simple relations between the earthquake parameters and the deformational behavior of the peat. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So that's your class of Science Fellows 2013. If you'd like a little more detail, Shauna has a wonderful blog that's also in your package. And
yes,
what's interesting is the academic credentials of these people are just spectacular. And if you look at the number of continents represented in this class, it's quite remarkable.
Yep.
So we hope that you build community. And for the Science Fellows, please stay in touch with us and the Council as your careers evolve. Thank you.
Great. Peter, thank you very much.